injury to Jayden Daniels for the Washington Commanders late last night, down 31 points in a loss to the Seahawks. He's kept in on a zone read play in the fourth quarter that ends with him dislocating his non-throwing elbow. This was Dan Quinn, the Commanders head coach, at the podium earlier today when asked about the handling of that move late. More on that. ESPN NFL insider Dan Graziano joins us now. Dan, hearing that accountability from the head coach there, what's the latest that you've heard? Anything new maybe besides that on the injury?
Well, I think with Jayden Daniels, they did an X-ray, came back negative, so that's good news, nothing broken. But that's not really the big part of this. They're doing an MRI as well, and I think once they analyze those results, they'll have some sense of the extent of the ligament damage, what kind of surgery is or isn't necessary, and then we'll know a timetable. Obviously, I think Jayden Daniels should be expected to miss a fair bit of time. We don't know for a fact that that will be the rest of the season, but I certainly think that's possible. It's just a matter of getting those MRI results and having the team take a look at them and figure out what the return timetable will be.
How much blowback, if any, should Dan Quinn get for having Jayden Daniels in at that point of the game, a game in which he was basically running for his life on every pass play?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you're hearing it in his voice and his words that he's already feeling that, whether it's from the outside or whether it's from inside of him or both. Look, it's the kind of thing, I mean, you really don't see a lot of teams do it, and you certainly don't see a lot of teams do it with whatever he said, 12 and a half minutes left. So there is a hindsight element to it, but yeah, I mean, the game's out of reach. This is a player with whom they've been incredibly careful. Remember, they held him out last week. They ruled him out early for week 8 because of the injury he was dealing with. They didn't even give him a chance to work through it in practice. And they've said at every turn, they want the long term to be the priority with Jayden Daniels. And obviously leaving him in long enough to get hurt was cuts against that. But, if he doesn't get hurt on that drive and then they take him out, we're not having this conversation. I think it's a difficult thing when you're in the heat. I mean, you guys would know better than I would. When you're in the heat of competition at that kind of level, to say, all right, it's over, let's get him out of there. I think it's difficult for the players to come to grips with that too, right? All right, as long as you're, as long as you feel like you can come back, you want to stay in. So I think there's a little bit of hindsight element to it, but obviously unfortunate that it broke that way.
Certainly unfortunate news there for a Commanders team that's had a big slip back after all the success last year that culminated in the NFC Championship. I want to look ahead at how injuries will affect the way we look at the NFL trade deadline that's coming up tomorrow at 4 o'clock Eastern. Another team in the mix for that, we got the news Joe Alt going to be done for the year, season-ending ankle injury in the last game. For a Chargers team that's held ground in the AFC West, is that something with the injuries to Alt and Rashawn Slater that they may try and address at the trade deadline? And is there any real candidate for that at this point?
That's the thing. I think they would try to address it, but offensive tackle is not a position at which teams like to trade players away at any point in the season, let alone at any point in the year, let alone the middle of the season. So it's difficult to find that. Now, could you take a shot on someone like an Evan Neal that didn't work out with the Giants? Could you convince yourself as a coaching staff, yeah, he can play tackle for us, he couldn't for the Giants? That's the kind of thing you probably look at getting a distressed asset from someone and having it, turn out to be better than it was in his last stop. I think the Chargers will definitely be looking, because you mentioned Rashawn Slater hurt and out for the year as well. So they're down both starting tackles. They've been playing Bobby Hart at the right tackle. I mean, I covered 10 years ago when he was with the Giants. I was shocked to find out he's still in the league. He got hurt in yesterday's game. So they're just really sort of losing bodies left and right on the offensive line. They're going to need to add somebody, whether that's via trade or some other way. And yeah, I think to the extent that there are offensive linemen available, you can expect the Chargers to be inquiring about them.
Well, again, as Mike said, with the trade deadline coming up, Philadelphia Eagles general manager Howie Roseman is at it again, trading for a couple of cornerbacks last week, Michael Carter II and Jair Alexander, now trading for Jalen Phillips, the edge rusher from Miami. So who else is likely to get moved before tomorrow at 4 Eastern?
I think you look at Miami's roster and you see what's going on there. They fired the general manager on Friday, the day after losing a Thursday night game. And I think that tells you, and the organization is interested in seeing what it can do in terms of getting something for the guys that aren't going to be part of their future. And you see that with the Jalen Phillips trade. So is Bradley Chubb, another edge rusher, available? Matt Judon is on that team, not a guy that's going to be around there for very long. Jordan Brooks, the linebacker, Jalen Wright, the running back that they haven't been using. I think that's a roster to look at where teams are kind of scoping it out and saying, what would it take to get some of these players? That's not to say Miami moves all those guys. It's not to say they make any more moves at all. But that is a team that looks like it's in transition, and there are some players that are of interest to other teams. There are teams like the Jets for whom we could say the same thing. You know, is someone like a Jermaine Johnson or a Quinnen Williams going to be somebody that another team would take a shot on? Breece Hall is a running back we've heard a lot about all year in terms of potentially being traded. Last week or so, it seems like the Jets have been more inclined to keep him. Somebody told me the problem with the Jets is they're trying to move the players teams don't want, and the players teams want, they don't want to move. So that could make it difficult. Browns are a team you guys were just talking about. Obviously, their season doesn't look like it's headed anywhere, and there are some players on that roster that I think people are interested in. Another running back, Jerome Ford, could be available to teams looking for help at that position. And there may be offensive linemen on the Browns that have, that are of interest to other teams. We were just talking about offensive linemen. So Jacoby Myers, wide receiver with Las Vegas, he's made it public that he wants out. They haven't been able to reach agreement on a new contract. So he's a guy that you could see landing somewhere else here in the next, 23 hours as teams are looking for wide receiver help.
People have talked about the high-end edge rushers plenty. Is there any realistic chance that we see a guy like Trey Hendrickson or even Myles Garrett, who was awfully frustrated after the most recent Browns loss, actually moved at the deadline?
We've been told in no uncertain terms that the Browns do not intend to trade Myles Garrett. They've made that clear. The Bengals are telling teams that are asking about Trey Hendrickson the same thing. Now, Bengals have lost 2 straight games in which they scored at least 38 points. Now, how do you take that? One, they can't afford to trade away defensive players because they don't have enough good ones as it is. Or two, do you start to give up on the season at 3-6? I don't think they're in that point. You could see Bengals players move, like Logan Wilson, the linebacker. They haven't really had a role for him. He has made it clear he wants out. That's a guy I could see moving off of Cincinnati's roster here in the next day. But Hendrickson, at last time I checked in, which was this morning, teams were still being told that they were not interested in trading him. Matt Crosby in Las Vegas, same kind of thing. I think if there's a big name edge rusher likely to move, if we go back to Miami and we look at Bradley Chubb.